In corporate America, they say revenge is unprofessional. What they don't tell you is how goddamn satisfying it can be, especially when it's served cold, calculated, and with a side of absolute career destruction. I didn't start out wanting to ruin Thomas Wilson's life. But when he took everything I'd worked for and handed it to his talentless nephew on a silver platter, well, let's just say I discovered depths to my patience and creativity I never knew existed. You know that feeling when you've been working on something for 2 years, pouring your soul into it, only to have it yanked away at the finish line? That hollow ache in your chest when you realize meritocracy is a lie they sell you in business school. Yeah, that was just the beginning. My name is Michael Pearson, and this is the story of how I systematically dismantled my boss's career, reputation, and future, all while getting promoted twice in the process. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday at Meridian Dynamics. I'd arrived early as usual, thermos of black coffee in hand, ready to put the finishing touches on my presentation. 2 years of research, development, and navigating corporate politics had led to this moment. My market expansion strategy for the Asia-Pacific region was finally ready to present to the board. I remember straightening my tie in the reflection of my monitor, feeling that rare mix of confidence and excitement. This project wasn't just good, it was exceptional. The data analytics alone had taken months, not to mention the cultural market research, competitive analysis, and strategic partnerships I'd quietly been nurturing. This was my masterpiece, my ticket to the executive floor. Morning, Mike. Thomas stopped by my cubicle, leaning against the wall with that fake casual posture of his. I should have noticed something was off by the way he wouldn't quite meet my eyes. Morning, boss. Just getting ready for the presentation. I've added those last-minute projections you wanted. He shifted his weight, fiddling with his watch. A tell I would later learn meant he was about to lie through his teeth. About that, Mike, there's been a change of plans. My stomach dropped even before he continued. The board wants someone with a fresh perspective on this. I'm going to have James present the Asia-Pacific strategy instead. James, his 26-year-old nephew who'd been with the company all of 4 months. The same James who had asked me last week if South Korea was the good Korea or the bad one. That's my project, I said, my voice embarrassingly small in that moment. I've been working on this for 2 years. Thomas, James doesn't know the first thing about. I've already decided. He cut me off, that familiar, authoritative tone sliding into place. James has been looking for an opportunity to prove himself, and I think this is perfect. Besides, he has that MBA from Wharton. The board loves that kind of pedigree. What he meant was that James's father was on the board. What he meant was that nepotism trumps merit every time. What he meant was, know your place. Mike, you'll hand over all your materials to James this morning. Make sure he's up to speed by Thursday. And with that, he walked away, leaving me sitting there with my career in pieces around me. I'd like to say I immediately plotted my revenge, that I instantly transformed into a cold, calculating machine of vengeance. But the truth is, I spent the first hour in a daze of shock and disbelief, the second hour fighting back tears of frustration in a bathroom stall, and the third hour seriously considering quitting. But I didn't quit. Instead, I did something far more dangerous. I smiled, nodded, and became the most helpful, accommodating version of myself as I handed over everything to James. I watched him stumble through my work, making elementary mistakes and fundamentally misunderstanding the strategic vision. I corrected him politely, explained patiently, and all the while something dark and resolute was taking shape in my mind. Thanks for being so cool about this, Mike, James said to me that afternoon, his privileged smile showing perfect teeth that had never known a day of real stress. Uncle Thomas says you're the best team player in the department. Happy to help, I replied, and I meant it, because in that moment I decided I wasn't going to quit. I wasn't going to file a complaint that would go nowhere. I wasn't going to accept this and move on. I was going to destroy Thomas Wilson so thoroughly that his name would become synonymous with failure. And I would do it by being the best goddamn team player Meridian Dynamics had ever seen. The board meeting came and went. James fumbled through my presentation, taking credit for 2 years of my work while barely understanding the slides he was reading. Thomas beamed proudly from the corner. The board members nodded along, impressed not by the content but by the family connection presenting it. I sat quietly in the back, taking detailed notes. Not on the presentation, I knew that material better than I knew my own reflection, but on the people in the room. Who asked what questions? Who seemed skeptical? Who deferred to whom? The invisible power dynamics that really controlled meridian dynamics. That night, I went home to my empty apartment and opened a new document on my laptop. I titled it Project Phoenix because I'm nothing if not a fan of symbolism. And I began to plan. My revenge would not be quick or simple. It wouldn't involve embarrassing Thomas in a meeting or sending an angry email to HR. No, what I envisioned was far more comprehensive, a complete dismantling of Thomas Wilson, piece by piece, until nothing remained of his reputation or career prospects. The first phase of my plan was simple. Become indispensable. Not just to Thomas, but to everyone around him. I needed to be the person everyone turned to, the one who knew all the systems, all the people, all the unwritten rules. I needed to be so embedded in the fabric of meridian dynamics that I could pull any string and watch the effects ripple through the organization. I started arriving earlier, staying later. I volunteered for the projects no one wanted. I fixed problems before they became problems. I built relationships with administrative staff, IT personnel, accounting, the invisible infrastructure that actually keeps companies running. "Mike, do you have a minute?" became the most common phrase I heard in the hallways, and I always did. I always had a minute, an hour, whatever was needed. I became the company's institutional memory and problem solver, all while keeping a perfectly pleasant, if slightly forgettable, demeanor. Thomas noticed, of course. How could he not? But he misinterpreted my behavior entirely. "See, I knew you'd bounce back," he told me one day, about 3 months after the Asia-Pacific incident. "This is why I've always valued you, Mike. You don't let setbacks get to you." I smiled and thanked him for his confidence in me. Inside, I was cataloging his weaknesses, his tendency to take long lunches on Wednesdays with clients that weren't really clients, his habit of forwarding confidential information to his personal email, his consistent misrepresentation of quarterly numbers to make his department look better. Phase 2 of Project Phoenix began 6 months in. By then, I had built a reputation as the guy who could make things happen across departments. I'd also carefully constructed a network of allies, not friends, mind you, but people who owed me favors or recognized my usefulness. The beauty of Phase 2 was its subtlety. I never directly undermined Thomas. I never spoke ill of him to anyone. Instead, I simply highlighted realities. Thomas is really pushing for this approach. I would say in meetings, right before presenting data that showed why said approach was deeply flawed. As Thomas always says, I would begin, before quoting him slightly out of context in ways that made him sound short-sighted or out of touch. I became his greatest advocate and his worst enemy simultaneously. I praised him publicly while ensuring that everyone could see the Emperor had no clothes. Meanwhile, James was struggling. Without my project to coast on, his actual capabilities were becoming apparent to everyone except Thomas. The nephew was in over his head, making rookie mistakes and missing deadlines. I made sure to be the one to help him clean up his messes, always documenting everything, always leaving a paper trail. "I'm so screwed, Mike," James confided in me one evening as I helped him salvage a report due the next morning. "Uncle Thomas keeps giving me these huge responsibilities, but I don't know what I'm doing half the time." "We all start somewhere," I said kindly, fixing his disastrous spreadsheet. "The important thing is learning from mistakes." What I didn't tell him was that I was keeping a detailed log of every mistake, every missed deadline, every misrepresentation. Not to use against James, he was just a pawn in this game, but as evidence of Thomas's poor judgment. Phase 3 began almost accidentally. I was having lunch with Clara from HR, part of my ongoing effort to have allies in every department, when she mentioned they were looking for someone to lead a new cross-functional team. "It needs to be someone everyone trusts," she said. "Someone who can work with all the department heads without stepping on toes." I didn't have to suggest myself. Clara did it for me. You would be perfect. Mike, let me talk to Patricia about it. Patricia Matthews was the COO, 3 levels above Thomas in the corporate hierarchy. I had met her exactly twice, but I had made both encounters count. 2 weeks later, I was called into a meeting with Patricia, Clara, and 2 other executives I barely knew. They offered me the position, Special Projects Manager, reporting directly to the COO's office. It came with a substantial raise, a small team of my own, and, most importantly, a lateral move out from under Thomas's authority. The look on Thomas's face when I told him I was being promoted out of his department was worth every minute of the previous 9 months. You're leaving? He asked, genuinely shocked. In his mind, I was the reliable worker bee who would always be there, picking up his slack and making him look good. It's a great opportunity, I said. Patricia specifically requested me. I could see him recalibrating in real time, trying to figure out how my promotion might benefit him, how he could claim credit for my development. Well, I've always told Patricia you have potential. He lied, smoothly. I'm glad she finally took my advice. Actually, I said, allowing myself the tiniest twist of the knife. She mentioned it was based on the cross-departmental work I've been doing, the stuff outside my regular duties here. His smile faltered just slightly. Well, I've always encouraged you to expand your horizons. You certainly have, I agreed, thinking of my stolen project. In fact, I'd say everything that's happening now started the day you gave the Asia Pacific project to James. He didn't pick up on the edge in my voice. Thomas never was good at reading people, a fatal flaw in corporate politics. My new role was perfect for Phase 3 of Project Phoenix. As Special Projects Manager, I had legitimate reasons to be involved in virtually every aspect of the company's operations. I had access to information and people that would have been off limits before. And most importantly, I had Patricia's ear. I didn't rush things. Revenge is a dish best served cold. After all, for the first few months in my new role, I focused solely on excelling. My team tackled several high-priority initiatives and delivered results. Patricia was impressed, the board was impressed, and my reputation continued to grow. Thomas, meanwhile, was struggling without me. The department's efficiency had noticeably declined. Projects were being delivered late, clients were complaining, James was becoming a liability rather than an asset. I watched it all from my new position, occasionally offering help that served my purposes. I became Thomas's informal advisor, someone he increasingly turned to when things went wrong, which they did, with remarkable frequency. I don't know what's happening to my department. He confided in me one day over coffee. Everything's falling apart since you left. Growing pains, I assured him. Every transition has them. What I didn't tell him was that I had identified and quietly removed several process improvements I'd implemented over the years. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that could be traced back to me. Just small adjustments that, when taken together, ensured the department would run at about 70% of its former efficiency. Phase 4 began exactly 1 year after Thomas had taken my project away. By then, I had compiled a substantial dossier on his mismanagement, ethical lapses, and poor decision-making. I had records of his extended absences, copies of emails where he took credit for others' work, and documented evidence of his favoritism toward James at the expense of more qualified team members. I had everything I needed to destroy him in one swift move, but that wasn't the plan. Destruction wasn't enough. I wanted replacement. The opportunity came when Patricia mentioned that the company was restructuring. Several departments, including Thomas's, would be consolidated under new leadership. We need someone who really understands the inner workings of those teams, she told me. Someone who can manage the transition without disrupting operations. I didn't volunteer. I didn't have to. You're the obvious choice, Mike, Patricia said. You've proven yourself with the special projects team, and you know those departments better than anyone. And just like that, 13 months after Thomas had stolen my project and given it to his nephew, I was being promoted to a position that would make me his boss. The meeting where this was announced was everything I had dreamed of and more. Thomas sat stunned as Patricia explained the new reporting structure. James looked like he might throw up. The rest of the department seemed cautiously optimistic. I had built a reputation as a fair and competent manager, after all. I know this is a big change, Patricia concluded, but I'm confident that under Mike's leadership, these consolidated departments will thrive. Thomas approached me after the meeting, his face a mask of forced pleasantness. Congratulations, he said, extending his hand. I look forward to working with you in this new capacity. I shook his hand firmly, meeting his eyes. I have some big plans for the department, I said. I'm counting on your support during this transition. He nodded, not yet realizing that the transition I had in mind would not include him. I took 2 weeks to settle into my new role before I began the final phase of Project Phoenix. During that time, I met individually with everyone who now reported to me, listening to their concerns and ideas. Everyone except Thomas, whom I kept waiting, a small but pointed reminder of our new power dynamic. When I finally called him into my office, larger than his now, I was prepared for every possible reaction. Thanks for your patience, I said as he took a seat across from my desk. It's been a busy couple of weeks. Of course, he said, still maintaining the facade of supportiveness. It's a big adjustment for everyone. Indeed, I agreed. Which brings me to the purpose of this meeting. I've been reviewing the structure of our newly combined departments, and I've had to make some difficult decisions. His smile faltered slightly. What kind of decisions? I slid a folder across the desk to him. I'm creating a new position, Regional Coordination Specialist. It's based in our Omaha office. Thomas stared at the folder but didn't open it. Omaha? I don't understand. It's all outlined in there, I said, gesturing to the folder. The company needs someone with your experience to oversee the Midwest regional operations. It's an important role. Thomas. Now he opened the folder, scanning the contents with increasing alarm. This is a demotion, he said finally. I prefer to see it as a strategic reassignment, I replied, using the exact same words he had used on me 13 months earlier. The Omaha office needs strong leadership. I'm not moving to Omaha, he said flatly. My family's here. My life is here. I nodded understandingly. I realize it's a big change. That's why I'm giving you an alternative option. I slid a second folder across the desk. Standard severance package, 3 months salary, continuation of benefits for 60 days, and a neutral reference for future employers. Thomas's face had gone from pale to red. This is ridiculous. I've been with this company for 15 years. You can't just push me out. I'm not pushing you out, I said calmly. I'm offering you a choice between continued employment in Omaha or a severance package here. The company is restructuring. Thomas, these things happen. I'll talk to Patricia about this, he threatened. I smiled slightly. Of course, but you should know that this restructuring plan has already been approved by the executive team, including the reassignment of certain personnel to regional offices. The truth was, Patricia had given me considerable latitude in reorganizing the department. I had presented a comprehensive plan that genuinely improved efficiency and reduced costs, while also happening to relocate Thomas to corporate Siberia. Why are you doing this? He asked, his voice both angry and bewildered. For a moment, I considered telling him everything. How he had stolen my project, how he had given it to his unqualified nephew, how he had set me back years in my career trajectory, how I had spent the last 13 months methodically planning his professional demise, but there was no satisfaction in explaining revenge to its target. The satisfaction came from execution. It's not personal, I lied. It's just business. He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something like recognition flicker in his eyes. Maybe he remembered the Asia-Pacific project. Maybe he finally understood the consequence of his actions. You have until Friday to decide, I said, effectively ending the meeting. Omaha or severance, either way, I'll need your current office cleared by next Monday. Thomas chose the severance package, as I knew he would. His pride wouldn't allow him to accept such an obvious demotion, and his family situation made relocation difficult. He cleared out his office on Friday afternoon, avoiding eye contact with everyone. I made sure to be visibly busy elsewhere in the building during his departure. This wasn't about witnessing his humiliation. It was about systematically dismantling the career of the man who had thought he could discard my work without consequences. With Thomas gone, Phase 5, the final phase of Project Phoenix, could begin. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about ensuring he could never recover professionally. I waited 2 weeks before I began my review of all projects and initiatives that had been under Thomas's purview. It was a thorough, documented process that involved numerous meetings, detailed analysis, and input from team members at all levels. What emerged from this review was damning. Inconsistencies in financial reporting, projects that existed only on paper, client relationships that had been neglected to the point of near collapse. None of it was criminal, but all of it painted a picture of gross mismanagement. I presented my findings to Patricia in a 3-hour meeting, complete with documentation and testimonials from team members. "I had no idea things were this bad," she said, reviewing the evidence. "How did this go unnoticed for so long?" "Thomas was very good at managing upward," I explained. "He made sure his superiors only saw what he wanted them to see." Patricia sighed heavily. "Well, I'm glad we made the changes we did. Obviously, we made the right choice putting you in charge." "Thank you," I said. "I just want to make sure we address these issues thoroughly so they don't happen again." What happened next wasn't my doing, not directly. Patricia took my findings to the executive team. The executive team involved legal and finance. An internal audit was conducted. Thomas's severance was frozen pending investigation. Word got out, as it always does in corporate settings. Thomas's name became associated with mismanagement and questionable practices. The reference calls began coming in. Thomas was job hunting, and potential employers wanted to know about his time at Meridian Dynamics. Clara from HR handled most of these calls. Company policy prohibited saying anything negative, but there were ways to convey concerns while staying within those guidelines. "We can confirm that Thomas Wilson worked here from 2008 to 2023, Clara would say. "Company policy prevents me from commenting further." The lack of a positive statement spoke volumes. 6 months after Thomas left, I ran into him at an industry conference. He looked older, tired. His suit, once impeccably tailored, hung a little loose on his frame. "Mike," he said, nodding curtly when we passed in the hallway, "I could have walked by. My revenge was complete. Thomas was struggling to find comparable employment, his reputation in the industry tarnished. The last I'd heard, he was doing contract work at a fraction of his former salary, but I stopped. "Thomas," I said, "how have you been?" He gave a hollow laugh. "Like you care, like you don't know exactly how I've been." I said nothing, waiting. "You destroyed me," he said finally, his voice low. "All because I gave one project to my nephew." "Not just any project," I corrected him quietly. "My project, 2 years of my life, my shot at advancement." "So this was revenge," he said, a statement rather than a question. I considered denying it, but what was the point? "Call it karmic redistribution," I said. "You made a choice that day. Thomas, so did I." He shook his head slowly. "I never thought you had it in you. You were always so agreeable." "That was my first mistake," I admitted. "Being so agreeable that you thought you could take what was mine without consequences. I corrected that mistake." We stood in silence for a moment. 2 men with a shared history of professional destruction, one as the architect, one as the subject. "For what it's worth," he said finally, "I'm sorry about the Asia Pacific project. It was wrong." I nodded, accepting the apology, but offering nothing in return. "Good luck, Thomas," I said, and walked away. 2 years after Thomas Wilson stole my project and gave it to his nephew, I was sitting in his former office, actually a nicer office, as I'd been promoted again to Senior Director of International Operations. The Asia-Pacific expansion was flourishing under my remote guidance. James had long since left the company, his uncle's protection gone. Was it worth it? The 13 months of careful planning, the emotional labor of hiding my true intentions, the calculated risks I took along the way. Some might say no, Some might argue that I should have simply found another job, filed a complaint with HR, or confronted Thomas directly. The professional world is full of injustices. They would say, you can't right every wrong. But as I sat in my office, reviewing the quarterly results from our new Singapore office, an office that existed because of my original Asia-Pacific strategy, I knew my answer. In corporate America, they say revenge is unprofessional. What they don't tell you is that sometimes revenge and success are exactly the same thing. Thomas made his choice. I made mine. He chose nepotism over merit, short-term convenience over long-term strategy. I chose patience, planning, and the systematic dismantling of the man who thought he could steal my future. I don't regret it, not for a second. Because in the end, Thomas Wilson didn't just lose his job, his reputation, and his career trajectory. He lost something far more valuable, the illusion that actions don't have consequences. And I didn't just get revenge. I got everything I wanted and more. I got my career back on track, my project implemented successfully, and the recognition I deserved. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't just success. It's success built on the ashes of those who wronged you. And as I signed off on the proposal for our next international expansion, this time into South America, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. Revenge, served cold and calculated, tastes exactly like victory. The end of my story isn't really an ending. It's ongoing, evolving as my career continues its upward trajectory. Thomas is a cautionary tale now, a story whispered in break rooms and at industry events. Be careful how you treat people on your way up, they say, because you never know who might engineer your way down. I don't correct them. I don't take credit for what happened to Thomas Wilson. I don't need to. The satisfaction is in knowing and seeing the results of my careful planning unfold exactly as I intended. Some nights, when I'm working late in my corner office, I think about how differently things might have gone if Thomas had simply acknowledged my work, given me the credit I deserved, allowed me to present my own project to the board. Such a small thing, really, to treat people with professional respect, to recognize merit over nepotism. Would I have eventually reached this position anyway, through hard work and persistence? Perhaps, but it would have taken longer, been less certain. Thomas's fatal flaw wasn't giving the project to his nephew. It was underestimating the quiet, agreeable employee he thought he could use and discard without consequences. It was failing to recognize that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who smiles and nods while plotting your destruction. I've learned to be more careful in my own management style. I recognize talent, reward merit, and never, ever steal credit from those who work for me. Not just because it's right, but because I know better than most what can happen when you create an enemy with nothing to lose and everything to prove. If there's a moral to this story, it's not that revenge is sweet, though it certainly can be. It's that in the complex ecosystem of corporate politics, the most important survival skill isn't aggression or even intelligence, it's patience. The willingness to play the long game, to see 10 moves ahead, to build a strategy so subtle that your target never sees it coming until it's far too late. Thomas Wilson gave my project to his nephew because in that moment, he had the power, and I did not. I destroyed Thomas Wilson's career because I took the time to acquire the power, the position, and the influence to do so. The difference between us isn't just a matter of ethics or character, it's a matter of vision. Thomas saw an opportunity for short-term gain and took it, never considering the long-term consequences. I saw a complete strategic picture, past, present, and future, and executed accordingly. In the end, that's why I succeeded where he failed. Not because I was smarter or more talented, though perhaps I was both, but because I understood something fundamental about power in the corporate world. It isn't about the position you hold. It's about the connections you build, the information you gather, and most importantly, the patience with which you deploy both. Thomas Wilson learned that lesson too late. I learned it just in time. As for James, Thomas's nephew, last I heard, he was working at his father's company. Some lessons, it seems, are never learned at all. But that's not my concern anymore. My focus is on the future, my future. the company's future, the opportunities that lie ahead now that I have the platform to pursue them. And if, occasionally, I think about Thomas Wilson and allow myself a small smile of satisfaction, well, that's between me and my conscience. After all, in corporate America, they say revenge is unprofessional. But what they don't tell you is this: sometimes it's also perfectly justified.